Hey there everyone, and welcome to Tabletop RPG Horror Story Cringe with D&D Doge. In today's episode, we have a tale about a new player refusing to work together with a party, a story about a dungeon master that can't be bothered to read a player's backstory, and much more. So, without further ado, let's get right into these stories. God decides to be a psychopath because it's what his character would do. By Reddit user StickyFinger95. So, I never thought I'd be writing one of these, but after years of DMing for long-term campaigns and one-shots, I finally had a bad one. My cousin asked me to DM a one-shot for her boyfriend, and their friend because she wanted to start her own campaign with the two of them, and wants to get a refresher on the rules after not having played in years, and with the other two having never played. I'm always excited to teach people the game, and I've probably introduced over a dozen people to the game at this point. We have a 3-hour character building session, and it goes great. Everyone is so excited about the game, and are really interested in how the game works. The only problem we run into is, while my cousin and her friend let me help them through every step of the creation, the boyfriend is having some issues choosing, and wouldn't let me know when he was ready for me to help again, so he was sitting there for 20 minutes doing nothing in between. No problem. I'm not there to force people to make decisions, and we have a week to decide. I leave that night, letting everyone know that they can text me with any character creation questions, and to work on a 1-paragraph backstory to ground the character. Then we get to the day of the one-shot. This is where it went bad. I show up, and guess whose character sheet is not finished? Not only that, but I am holding open the pages in the book for him to look at, and to copy onto his sheet, and he is purposely ignoring me to look up some bootleg site that is confusing him. It was not Wikidot. I would have actually liked him to use that. So we get done with that, and there's an hour wasted. We finally start the one-shot, and it's pretty standard stuff. I'm not winning any writing awards for this story, but I think it encompasses all parts of D&D. The story opens up in a town square, and goblins are attacking. The heroes all jump into action and slay them. Now, this is where the boyfriend's unnatural game choices begin, and it also should be noted that this is where I noticed that he cracks open his first White Claw. After they kill the goblins, the town guards come up to the group and ask them to come with them to the mayor's office for a reward. The boyfriend's Tabaxi Ranger doesn't like cops, so he runs into the woods? Okay, I'm all about player agency, so I'm cool with it. But then he complains for the next 15 minutes, as he misses out on the gold reward and the roleplay with the mayor, getting the main quest of tracking down the women that the goblins have been kidnapping for the past few weeks. Then they get sent to a magic shop for some free supplies, and he decides to sit on the roof while they go in. He then proceeds to whine that he didn't get any magic items. My cousin asks the mayor for a guide to show them the way out of town, so I make up a 14-year-old boy, stereotypical nerd, who is in charge of the mayor's dietary needs and saving up for school. While they're in the magic shop, they insight check Eugene, and I say, he looks nervous, because they rolled an 11. He's nervous because the magic shop owner is actually the dragon that controls the goblins and is working with the mayor to kill adventurers who stand in their way. They don't ask him any more questions and proceed out of town. As soon as Eugene is about to leave, the Tabaxi badass decides that he's going to try and stab Eugene in the neck. The party saves Eugene by throwing him into the river, and the boyfriend is all pissed off that they didn't let him kill a child. This pattern gets more common as more White Claws go down the hatch, and we get some awesome moments, like him asking why they would even be interested in saving the women, or telling the party that if they don't choose the path that he does, he's quitting. Hiding underneath books while the party solves 2 puzzle rooms without him, and trying to steal the final blow on the dragon after he wasted the whole fight doing nothing, and what I can only describe as trying to outsmart the DM. Ultimately, I let him know that it's not my job as a DM to give his character a reason to go on the adventure. He needs to react to things like a normal person, and he wouldn't be allowed at my table anytime soon since he made the game unfun for the other players. And now my cousin isn't so sure if she wants to run a campaign with her boyfriend in it. TLDR, douchebag drunk boyfriend ruins the game for his girlfriend and best friend by acting like a psychopath. Yeah, that sounds like that would probably get a bit annoying. Though I do have to say that it was this player's first time playing, and it didn't sound like anyone said anything to the boyfriend until after the game ended. Learning D&D, or any tabletop RPG for that matter, isn't just learning the stats, rules, and mechanics, but it's also learning tabletop RPG etiquette, and what is and isn't frowned upon at the table. This is why having a session 0 with this group, seeing how there were new players, would have been a good thing to do. Lay out some expectations and set some ground rules, and one of those rules should always be, make a character that has a reason to be with the party. So I would say, let him know what he did wrong, and give him a chance to correct those things. Or perhaps he acted that way on purpose, because he's not interested in D&D, but didn't want to tell his girlfriend. Who knows? But those are just my thoughts. What do y'all think? Let's move on. Player rage quits over Opteo's punishment, by Reddit user Filthy Hobo Man. A while back, I was running Tomb of Annihilation, and had a problem player that we'll call Mimi in the group. There were a lot of problems with him, but essentially, he had main character syndrome. His character needed to be the most powerful, most beautiful, and most classy. It's hard to stay classy when you're doing a hex crawl through the jungles of Chult. This group had a lot of good in-party banter, and would have a lot of fun poking fun at each other, and making jokes when they set up camp and whatnot. It was great, until they took the piss out of Mimi. There was a lot of material to work with, since Mimi is a high-class elf, who spent the entire journey scoffing and talking down to the party. How did Mimi respond? He refused to pack up camp, and he sat there in the middle of the jungle. When one of the players asked if he wanted to continue, he decided to cast Firebolt repeatedly to attempt to burn the jungle down. We all live in a tropical area, and this led to the funniest argument between two players on the feasibility of setting fire to a jungle. Quote, "Have you ever tried to light a banana leaf? It's freaking impossible, dude." Mimi eventually decides to continue. He tries to lone wolf it, and I tell him that he either continues with the party or he's out. He's done this crap before, and it just caused trouble. I was using a third-party add-on from PowerScore that helps plan travel days in the jungle. The next encounter is with a sentient bush that was created by Opteo. It gives out berries that grant you temporary hit points if you're nice, or poison you if you've disrespected the island or the dinosaurs. Most of the party interacted and ate some berries and got temporary hit points. Well, if you try to burn down the jungle, you get poison condition, and the runs. To the party's raucous laughter, Mimi stomped out of the session right quick. I never did get to show him the passage from the book, and that I wasn't picking on him. Though, I guess I really don't care either. We finished the campaign without him, and it was great. So it sounds to me that this player could sling the insults, but couldn't take what he was dishing out. Then he throws a tantrum, tries to arson the jungle, and then even the jungle told him that he was being a bastard. It sounds like the trash took itself out in this case, and the game was better for it. And before we move on to the following story, Lucky has a message. Thanks, bud. I hope they do that. But with that said, let's get into this story. How about some Haste? By Reddit user Guy82. If I had a nickel for each story that I had involving the Haste spell, I'd have 2 nickels. It's not a lot, but it's strange that it happened twice. First story. I'm playing a paladin. The DM says that an enemy spellcaster cast Haste on me, and immediately ends the spell, skipping my turn. I state that my paladin is not a willing creature, so it would not work. This sparks an argument that more or less boils down to him saying that I would be a willing creature because it's a beneficial spell, and I state that I would never accept a spell from the guy who just threw a lightning bolt at my party. But he just rules that it happens, and I lose my turn. The DM frequently pulled this kind of stuff, but the game dissolved a little while later because he lost the appetite for DMing. Second story. I'm a wizard with Haste, and it's a different DM. Whenever I try to cast it on anyone, every enemy on the board suddenly rushes my character, often going through multiple attacks of opportunity, and only stops when he loses concentration. I would get it if they were trained humanoids who knew how to target casters first, but it was also wild animals and other low intelligence monstrosities. I eventually stopped preparing the spell altogether, and the DM acts confused why I would never prepare such a fun spell. Eventually, I left that game. Well, those were some quick stories. That first story was BS, as that dungeon master just took OP's agency away, just so he could cancel his turn. Probably a good thing that DM lost the appetite for DMing. Then, the second story is a case of a DM not liking anything that can turn the tide of battle in the party's favor, thus making the enemies make illogical decisions just to prevent it. And then he has the gall to ask OP why he doesn't prepare that spell anymore. I don't blame OP for leaving that one. But let's move on. Post-haste. Dungeon Master litters campaign with their own previous player characters, and doesn't even read my backstory. By Reddit user, Ducky Dimension. So, this story is from a group that I used to play D&D and Pathfinder with all the time. I only really started playing these games maybe 5 years ago, and since I live in the middle of nowhere, I went online to play. A friend of mine had her own friend group that would essentially play a game every day of the week for a while, and since I had no life, I joined. I had fun with this group for a while, but problems were quick to arise over the time that I was with them. There are many stories and experiences that have tainted my overall experience of the games, stemming from this group, but I'm going to focus on one that I remember the most. We'll call the DM Todd. Todd was still new to DMing. He often stumbled over his descriptions of scenes, character dialogue, and had to retcon what he wanted to happen with some NPCs because he had trouble planning things around the group. We were all supportive, however, so usually this didn't bother us. This particular campaign, he was attempting a bit of a homebrew, but keeping it with the 5e rules to make it easier. He encouraged all of us to make backstories and send them to him, so he could come up with hooks for us alongside the main plot. I got enthused and decided to make a changeling bard for the campaign, who had 4 unique personas that they would use for performances and such. I was really happy with my backstory and excited for what the DM would throw my way when it came time for the backstories to be explored. The campaign begins, and everyone meets and starts questing together, and that is when we start meeting some old friends. Most of these player characters were characters I didn't know, because they were all from the campaigns that I either wasn't part of, or had happened before I joined. At first, it was fine. I'll never be upset with someone who makes cameos of their previous characters in their games. Oftentimes, it's a fun little Easter egg, and even a way to make the plot more meaningful. But that was not these PCs. Todd had a tendency to make his player characters very one-note. There was a parody Randy Savage guy that would randomly pop up wherever we went. There was a very annoying kobold that would pop up wherever we went, and eventually started traveling with the party. There was a guy that was actually in one campaign that I played in that showed up once or twice. There were 2 women PCs that showed up. I mean, every other town or stop we made, another DM PC was showing up to be kooky or give us side quests. What really started to grind my gears was how they all seemed to make fun of my character somehow. I was trying my best to make my bard comical, but also suave and charismatic. He would make jokes sometimes, and was very open with his opinions. Nearly every DMPC, even the kobold, would make offhanded jabs about my character's remarks, or make fun of in-game choices they made. I was essentially being made into the butt of the brunt of the jokes in the party, which honestly made me a little sad, and question if I should have chosen a different character concept. What ultimately broke my camel's back, however, was when it came time for the backstory exploration. Every one of the party members had a hook. There were only 5 players in the game, and we had found hooks for everyone else. It was my turn. Only, my hook was just wrong. In my backstory, my character had a dear friend and mentor that taught him the ropes and convinced him to be a bard. He was out looking for his mentor because he hadn't seen him in years. Todd threw him in as a drunk bard who made fun of my character. No mention of their past, no attempt at using the 2 traits that I hinted at in the backstory itself. Nothing. I confronted the DM about it out of character, asking how he got this interpretation of the mentor from what I wrote. His response was, "Well, I just kinda skimmed your backstory. I kinda forgot about it." "So, you didn't read my backstory?" "I skimmed it." "Did you skim everyone else's?" "No." I was pissed. I actually loved the character I'd made and the work I'd put into his story, but Todd never took the time to read any of it beyond a passing glance. Everyone else was having story hooks that they were perfectly happy with, and Todd had clearly thought out and planned for. But when it came to me, absolutely little to no effort. I felt utterly disrespected. It wasn't long after that the campaign was effectively cancelled, and the other players weren't very happy with Todd either. He tried running other games, but I didn't play any more of his games after this experience. TLDR. DM spent more time burying the party in DMPC cameos that happened way too much, and making my character the comic relief, rather than actually reading the backstory that I sent in, and ruined the game for me. Yeah, that sucks. Normally, I would just chalk this up to him being a new dungeon master, but the fact that he went out of his way to incorporate everyone else's backstories, but not OP's, it almost seems like that could have been intentional. Perhaps this DM just didn't like OP or didn't like the character or something, especially with the way that all of DM's characters made OP the butt of the joke. If it was by mistake, the DM could have just retconned the mistakes on the backstory and redo that portion, as it sounds like he didn't mind doing that with his DM NPCs. Though, who knows, maybe the newbie DM was feeling some burnout with his first time DMing, especially with playing a game every night of the week. I mean, you won't hear me say this phrase often, but that is just too much D&D. Let me know what you all think on this one. And if you have a story that you would like to be shared on the channel, be sure to post it to the D&D Doge subreddit, and who knows, it may just end up in a video. Much like our final story of the day. Poaching Player. Submitted to the D&D Doge subreddit by Reddit user BroodHunter2. I had just moved to a new state and put out feelers for new players. I was going to run a Rolemaster campaign. For those that don't know, Rolemaster characters take about an hour to build, if you know what you're doing, and a couple if you don't. This player gets together with me ahead of the game day and builds a character. On game session 1, everyone shows up and we sit down to play. Everyone starts introducing themselves, and when it comes to this player's turn, he introduces himself and then states, "I plan on running a campaign on Saturdays if anyone wants to join." I look at him and say, "Saturdays?" And he says yes. I say again, "Like today?" And he says yes. I am really pissed now, and I say, "Did you seriously come over, spend a few hours making a character, and then show up on session 1, just to try to poach all of my players 10 minutes after you get here?" After hearing my anger, he gets this deer in the headlights look and doesn't say anything. There are seriously like 2 minutes of dead silence as I stare at him. He is looking dumbfounded at me, and the rest of the new players are speechless. Suddenly, one of the new players looks at the guy and says, "Dude, that is so uncool. Are you stupid? What are you waiting for? Leave." Then he grabbed his stuff and left. The rest of the game day was dedicated to me, bouncing between pissed and dumbfounded, with the rest of the players assuring me that not all players in the area are like that. The following week, we got together to start, and as soon as everyone had gotten settled, another one of the players said, "At this point, I would like to poach you all from GM's game." We all burst into hysterical laughter as that broke the tension. The game moved forward, and the campaign went well. In my 40-odd years of gaming, this is still perhaps the strangest thing I have ever seen. Well, if this is the strangest thing OP has ever seen, I think he should count himself lucky, considering some of the stories that I read on the channel. Though, what was that player thinking? Oh, I'll just go to this dude's game and offer the other players to come to my game instead, and that will go smoothly. Though, I think the problem is that that player wasn't thinking. Thankfully, it sounds like the rest of the players and OP had a decent campaign though. And that will be all for today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may all of your games remain horror story free. Until next time.